All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Unorthodox podcast. Been a few weeks since I have seen you. I apologize for that. My name is Evan. You know that, though, unfortunately. So, of course, you can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and X at Unortho Bros. Go ahead, do there. We have announcements for the show on there, sketches, clips, whole 9 yards. Go give us a follow on there. You want to send us a question? You got some advice about for what I can do for the show? I'm looking for a new mic. Anyone has suggestions? You can send that all to, the Unorthodox Pod at proton.me. If you would like to donate to the show, you have some money lying around. I know things are tight right now. If you can give even $1 to the show, you can do that at on Venmo at Evan-Brennan-10. Still setting up the Patreon. A lot of things go into making a podcast. Any amount of money would help to keep the production of the show going, or you can request me money because you think I suck. That's acceptable too. I completely understand. Be sure to like, share, hit the notifications button, and subscribe, of course. Really helps the algorithm. All right. You're going to hear a lot of things today. We have a huge interview about the riots over in Britain. You're also going to hear my nose sniffling a lot, whistling maybe, because my allergies are, it's a bit of a living hell here in Iowa. Lots and lots of pollen. It's going to get worse. Yes, from my mother's side of the family, I got, that 6'2" German height. From my dad's, I got pasty Irish skin and allergies. So that's awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Northern Europeans. You are fantastic. All right, no announcements, no question of the day. We're going to have 2 guests on next week, though. It's going to be big. One of them is returning. Another's new. I expect only terrible, terrible things from it, but I am really looking forward to it. Should be a good time. All right. First. There we go. Okay, there's the graphic. Trump has come under fire once again after it was revealed that he has referred to Vice President Harris as a bitch in private multiple times. Trump responded to the accusations by saying that he was thankful he didn't get caught calling her a lying, dumb, race-baiting, political, and literal prostitute. He would never say those things because none of them are clearly not definitely true, of course. Hamas has revealed that they are looking to utilize paragliders to greater effect in future wars. Paragliders were used by Hamas in part to commit the murder of over 1,000 Jews on October 7th. For its part, Israel has revealed that they plan to defend against such an attack by painting a large mural of Israel on the side of a brick wall. I'm sure that will work swimmingly. All right, Fauci, back in the news. Dr. Anthony Fauci is back in the spotlight, urging Americans to mask up again as COVID cases are on the rise. He also revealed that he has been diagnosed with COVID for a 3rd time, despite being vaccinated and boosted a total of 6 times. Dr. Fauci gave the Unorthodox podcast this statement as his head was being placed in a guillotine. I understand we've made that joke before on the show, but I really, really do not like him. Feral hogs have been observed to be moving into more and more states as scientists begin to worry that they will pose a threat to the entire country. Former President Donald Trump has stated that this cannot happen and that he will defeat Kamala Harris this November. Only going to be more Kamala Harris jokes as we get closer to election season. Eventually, it's just going to be all of them. Have to do my part. Okay. These might be the 2 funniest graphics I've ever put on screen. But here we go. You'll understand why. The 2 clearly gay policemen. London's Metropolitan Police Chief has threatened that they will come after American citizens and use the full force of the law to punish them for perceived pro-riot speech. This includes, but is not limited to, extradition of American citizens. The Unorthodox podcast would like to categorically state that while we disagree with political violence except in the most extreme of cases, we would like to make an exception for these limey, big-toothed, tea-drinking faggots to be drawn and quartered by the very people they are throwing in prison for Facebook posts. But we would never, ever hope that King Arthur and Winston Churchill resurrect from the dead and shove Big Ben so firmly up the ass of Keir Starmer. Keir, I don't know how to say his name. And of course, we would never hope and pray that the people of Britain rise up and retake their country from terrorist-loving communist shit-stains that wish to use George Orwell's 1984 as a guide rather than a warning. So in conclusion, come and get us, you crumpet-sniffing queerbaits. I will be waiting for your gay little policemen with your gay little flashlights and your gay little neon vests with a Big Mac and 1776 projectiles, along with my favorite constitutional amendment. Fuck you, Scotland Yard. All right. What are you gonna do? Give us a strongly worded letter like, oi, we don't like it. Your Doctor Who sucks now. You got nothing. What's your country good for? You used to have an empire. You lost it. Your old lady died and you lost everything. Okay. So, huge interview. Okay, let me get the two fags off the screen. Wow, Evan, language. Get that off there. So, I have an interview. I'll explain it all over there. Fair warning, this was a pre-recorded interview. There was going to be a sketch before this as a little break. It's conceptually, I think it's hilarious. I just haven't, I filmed a few things of it. It just didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board. Hopefully have something for you next week. But head over to that interview. I will see you there. Keep it unorthodox. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Unorthodox Podcast. If everything goes according to plan, this will be the second segment of the show tonight. You will have just gotten a sketch where, if I am correct, it was Kamala Harris's head on a baby's body and me responding to real things she has said. I really hope I'm right about that, and I have time to film that, but that should be how it pans out. All the way from Oceania, we have Stephen Collins. I didn't plan on doing this interview, but some big stuff has been happening in Britain. Now we don't hear about a lot here in the U.S., just like the France riots last summer, because it is about something that the left holds near and dear, and that is unlimited illegal immigration. He is here to tell us about some of the riots that have been happening as a result of that over in the good old UK. Oceania, by the way, go read 1984. It's a bit cliche to say, like, oh, it's 1984. It's becoming more and more reality each day. I'm sure we'll get on that. Somehow we're going to get on the JFK assassination, as we have every single time. So, Stefan, as my most frequent guest, how are you doing?
Very good, Evan. I'm glad to be back on.
I highly doubt that. Highly doubt that. Not a lot of people are.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the Kamala Harris sketch. Because as you know, I'm not a fan of her in the slightest.
That just came to me like a bolt of lightning last night, and I thought, oh my God, I'm a genius. That is brilliant.
Well, she said a lot of very stupid things. She's done a lot of very stupid things as well, and the government well, not the government, but the media in the US is doing their best to suppress it. You're not allowed to look at any... You're not allowed to see any negative articles about Kamala Harris anymore. She's suddenly perfect. She's Kamala Harris 2.0.
I have a whole segment on that I saved for next week.
If she gets in, we're screwed. The UK is screwed. NATO countries are screwed. There's going to be a third world war. There will be untold amounts of illegal immigration into the United States. More people will die of fentanyl poisoning than ever before. And we're going to be screwed on when it comes to trade.
I had that thought. Like, who the hell expects Putin or Khomeini, whoever runs Iran, to take her seriously? They don't let women drive, and they expect her to meet about nuclear stuff.
She can't say anything off script, can she? No. Every time she's asked off script, did you see that? I assume you saw that clip of her being asked questions by Air Force 2, I assume it was.
Oh, yeah, yep.
And then she was like, I can't remember what she said, but it just sounded like she was trying to say something to a 6-year-old child. I was like, this person cannot be serious. How can you go from Biden to somebody who is arguably even worse for the Democratic nominee?
Joe Biden has an excuse. He has dementia. She's just retarded.
Yes. She is just retarded, 100%.
And I mean that in the clinical sense, not an insulting way. I mean, she is a water brain.
Yes, she is. Did you see the Joe Rogan episode where it was just one last thing? Did you see the Joe Rogan episode? He had, I think it was Michael Malice, was it?
Oh, yep.
He said, you can't insult Kamala Harris because it's either sexist or racist or ableist. And then Joe Rogan says, what do you mean ableist? So Michael says, well, because she's retarded.
No, that's a great thing about this election. We get the great combination of you're a sexist if you don't vote for Hillary Clinton, and you're a racist if you don't vote for Obama.
It's the best of both shitty worlds. Okay, so Stefan, just give us a rundown, basically, for those of us in the U.S. that might not know, because it is a surprising amount. I have asked people, like, hey, heard about what's going on in the UK? They have no idea. The media has done a great job of suppressing this. So just give us a rundown.
Well, first of all, I'd really like to thank Elon Musk for buying Twitter and
Oh, yeah.
renaming it X, because Elon Musk has definitely highlighted this. I don't know if he's done a very good job of like saying what has actually been going on, but he's been highlighting the two-tier system of justice really well. I don't know the tweets off the top of my head, but if you go on Elon Musk's Twitter feed, you can see that he's called Keir Starmer out for his two-tier system of justice, for what we're going to talk about in a little minute. So the riots in the UK that have been happening for the past week or so. Essentially what happened, and yeah, like you said, this will be primarily American audience. Some of you might have been following everything which has been going on, but the majority of people have probably only seen clips on social media if they've seen anything at all. You'll have heard that the riots, you might have heard that the riots mainly start, if you've heard anything about them at all, they just started out from the far right.
Yep,
and they're being portrayed as neo-Nazi skinheads who are just attacking Muslims and people of color for no reason at all. That's how it's been reported in the UK. I don't know if you've seen anything about it in the US. But the mainstream media, they basically lied to us. You know, what else is new? They've been lying straight to our face since November of 1963. There's a JFK quote. So the source of these riots. So they started out as protests and they quickly became violent. They started in the first place to protest against illegal immigration after 3 young girls, aged 9, 6, and 7 years old, were stabbed to death at a Taylor Swift themed dance class in Southport, a town in the northwest of England, about 35 miles away from where I live. This happened on July the 29th, so fairly recently. The mainstream media reported on the stabbings, but they were very hesitant to release the identity of the killer and suppress that information. But thanks to social media, we quickly found out that it was a 17-year-old boy, and he's got a very difficult name to pronounce. Axel Rubukabana, I think is how you pronounce it. It was relevant to state he's black, he's not a Muslim. But as you can imagine, with a name like that, and going off the facts that we've let tens of thousands of illegal immigrants into this country annually since 1997, many people have jumped to the assumption that he was an illegal immigrant, and people started angrily tweeting about illegal immigration and some organized protests against it, which started off as peaceful. It turned out that this 17-year-old wasn't an illegal immigrant. He was born in Wales, which is a part of the UK. To parents who migrated to the UK from Rwanda. Apparently, his parents were both Christians, and Rwanda is a country which closely resembles the how people behave in Europe. Maybe Google is suppressing information on this topic, but I couldn't find any information on whether his parents were here legally, so I just assumed that they were. Everything's gone quiet about the actual murders themselves, which were horrific, and I think we really need to highlight that, because this is the reason why these are happening. We have no idea what the killer's motives were. We don't know what kind of people he was hanging around with. Apparently, his family's religious beliefs were Christian, so I don't see any angle for a story about radical Islamic terrorism, even though that's what he's kind of been portrayed as. So I don't know what his motives were. Nobody does. The police aren't reporting anything on it. So, you know, what can compel somebody to want to murder 3 innocent children? You know, in all likelihood, they have no concept or understanding of any kind of xenophobia or racism. Yeah, I want to know. I think the world has a right to know. And obviously the parents of these kids, I assume, want to know. All we seem to know is that 6 years ago, this guy, he appeared in a BBC commercial promoting underprivileged children in the UK. At the time, he was 11 years old. So it's reasonable to assume, I'm not saying this for a fact, but it's reasonable to make the assumption that the BBC might have some information about him and his family in their archives. Maybe not. You know, maybe that's a long shot, but it's all we have to go on. So that's where I'd start. Some Twitter users have said that they have reason to believe that the BBC was involved in grooming this child, as well as several others, due to convincing them that they're underprivileged because they're not white and British, in order to make a good commercial highlighting the network's political agenda. And it planted seeds in the head that he needed to take action. Similar to kind of how in America you had the Nashville shooter, which I'm sure you all heard about.
Yep.
They killed a bunch of school children who were white and Christian because, you know, he/she/it, whatever the hell it was,
Stephen
stated in the manifesto. Yeah, stated in the manifesto that the motive was to make those privileged rich kids pay. I'm paraphrasing there, but that's the gist of it. It's an angle which I'd very much like some information on, and I hope that all the riots that are going on don't suppress that information, because I think it's a very important question, wouldn't you say?
Of course, yeah.
So he's scheduled for a court hearing in January of 2025. We might hear some more stuff about it then. Hopefully the news doesn't just suppress that story. But it's quite interesting, Evan, because like it's obviously these riots are taking part because of illegal immigration, but this guy wasn't an illegal immigrant. That's the story we're getting. So it's like, what are his motives then? Okay, if he was born in this country, he's lived in this country his entire life. His parents are migrants, but they seem like they're good people from what I know. They're not Muslims, they're Christians. Not that there'd be anything wrong with them if they were Muslims, but it's they don't have the Islamic terror angle to go on. So what can it possibly be? And I'm just thinking maybe that commercial, maybe it's a long shot, maybe I'm just throwing ideas into the wind, but I just like it seems maybe that commercial planted seeds in his head, like saying, I'm underprivileged. Just like I'm oppressed. And it's like I want to make these white people pay, kind of similar how to the Nashville shooters manifesto was. What do you make of all that stuff before we get into the actual riots themselves?
Oh, the hiding the Nashville shooter manifesto?
No, the stuff I've just told you about the guy who stabbed 3 kids.
How is the drug problem in the UK in big cities in the UK comparable to over in the US?
The drug problem.
Yes, like fentanyl. Is it a similar thing?
So fentanyl is coming through the US border, through the US Mexico border. So
Yeah.
obviously we're several thousand miles away from that. So we're not getting fentanyl from the cartels, which is definitely a good thing.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Drugs themselves, you got loads of gangs, loads of drugs being sold. I've got no idea if he was under the influence of any narcotics. I don't know if he was under the influence of any antidepressants, which make you homicidal and suicidal.
No one talks about that enough.
I don't know. Nobody knows. The media's not reporting on it. They've kind of gotten bored with it. Oh, that's old news. It's the riots now that we need to talk about. Like, I think that is very important.
Of course, yes. Now you are doing this interview at great personal risk to yourself because, as many people may not know, British police are now combing through Twitter, other social media platforms to find even the possible indication that you support these riots. Now, what do you have to say about that?
I've been on this show multiple times. I think you probably get the sense that I love the United States. I love their constitution and the history of it. Freedom of speech, I've said on my show multiple times before, is the foundation of Western civilization, and it should be a guaranteed, inalienable human right. We don't actually have that. We're allowed to say what we want because the government is allowing us to say it. If the government decides that we're not allowed to say something, they can suppress our speech because we don't have freedom of speech guaranteed. Never take the United States Constitution for granted. It is the greatest guarantor of human rights in the world. We also don't have a Second Amendment. Slightly off topic, we're not allowed to defend ourselves. If somebody wants to break into my house now and attack my family, I would not be allowed to attack them back. I would have to let them do it under the UK laws at the moment. I would be allowed to maybe grab a lamp, if I've been told. If there was a lamp nearby and I used it as a weapon, I would maybe be allowed to do that. But I'm not allowed to have a weapon. I'm not even allowed to have a baseball bat.
Even knives, I've heard.
I'm allowed to have a baseball bat, obviously, but I'm not allowed to use it as a weapon. I'm also allowed a crossbow, but I'm not allowed to use it as a weapon.
My God.
I think it is ridiculous. And I wish this country has something similar to the Second Amendment as well. And I won't go into detail about the other amendments to the Constitution, but I respect every single one of them. And I think they're all very important. And I think so many Americans just take them for granted as well. Because the UK is about as close to the US as you're going to get in a foreign country, with the exception of Canada.
I would say
and we don't have those same rights. So that's very important.
Of course.
The British police are now attacking anybody. Basically, they made it illegal for anybody to retweet anything that might be consistent with violence and promoting hate. So this law, I've got it on my phone. The relevant law is the Communications Act of 2003. It states electronic communications which are grossly offensive or indecent, obscene or menacing, or false for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience, needless anxieties to others is illegal. So they've said that if you retweet something, it falls under this law, and you can go to prison for it. Personally, I think that's a violation. It would be a violation of the First Amendment if we were in America. It's just a violation of our freedom of speech. But again, we don't actually have freedom of speech in this country. So we could go, yeah.
I mean, many people do not know.
I'm going to do my absolute, yeah, you're right.
is the only country in the world with actual freedom of speech. Back in high school, I had this argument with just about every foreign exchange student we had there. Like Sweden, they'd be like, well, Sweden has freedom of speech. It's right here in our constitution. Wait. In the fine print, it says accept hate speech. And I'm like, yeah, of course. So you don't have freedom of speech. Just what's the definition of hate speech? It constantly changes.
Yeah. It's quite dangerous because you can say, well, I think this is hate speech because you have a different opinion to me and I think that's hateful. They could say that. It's not good at all. And you're 100% right. The United States is the only country with freedom of speech. So we haven't actually addressed what these riots are, if you want to get into that.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so the riots themselves. So they started off with good intentions because at the time, people actually thought that this was an illegal immigrant that did these stabbings. And there's been numerous accounts of people who were illegal immigrants who came into the UK and murdered people or acid attacks people. There was the infamous grooming gangs of Rochdale and Rotherham, which for 5 years between 2007 and 2012 kidnapped and raped white girls. Jeez. And then basically sold them into the sex industry. And then when they were arrested, they accused them of being racist. The police in Greater Manchester specifically, Rochdale's the next town over from where I live, so it falls under Greater Manchester's constituency, knew about this in 2007, and they refused to do anything about it because they were scared of being called racist, and they were scared that it would cause riots. Well, Douglas Murray wrote a book.
Yep.
I can't remember what it's called, but Douglas Murray was talking about this, and he said he predicted 7 years ago that these kind of riots would happen if the UK didn't change the direction it was going in. And those grooming gangs themselves you can look them up. They're well documented stories in the UK, and I think and a lot of the people who were involved in these gangs were illegal immigrants as well. So I think that's massively tips the scales to people being supposedly racist, because it's not. And the average Muslim person, I'm friends with a lot of Muslim people. I get along with them really well. I think we've got far more in common with each other than people realize, Christians and Muslims. But it's like these radical extremists. And, you could say there were radical extremist Catholics in Ireland back in the 70s and the 90s as well. We're not immune to this. But it's like people saying, oh, I can't do anything because I don't want to be called a racist. I was like, it's disgusting. Anyway, back to these riots that have happening recently. So they started off with good intention. They were organising protests against the newly elected Labour government's weak and almost non-existent illegal immigration policy, which is definitely something worth protesting against. And people were protesting all across the UK in various cities, Manchester, Liverpool, and even Belfast in Ireland. You had proud IRA supporters in Ireland locking arms with British royalists.
I saw that. That's insane.
Catholics and Protestants united in protesting. That is insane. 20 years ago, if you would have said that, I would have said you're absolutely insane.
No.
But it has happened. That's united the Irish people. Unbelievable, really. So, regardless of the fact that the 17-year-old who murdered the 3 children was not an illegal immigrant, they felt as though it was highlighted an issue which the government is ignoring, which is even worse than doing an extremely poor job of it, like the Conservative government we've had for the past 14 years was prior to July 5th. The Conservative government, they did address it, they just did a terrible job of it. And I said to you off camera, Evan, it's the main reason why Brexit happened. And Brexit, economically speaking, has been a disaster. We've not handled it very well. But the reason people voted for it was because they thought that if we were no longer a part of the EU, that we would be able to set up our own laws and we wouldn't have people coming through freely through France.
Wow.
So we'd be able to have a strict border security, but we're not doing that because they're all going through France and they're getting a boat across the channel and they're just walking into the country through the beaches, and it's basically an invasion of our country. And again, this doesn't just affect white people. You have the media basically saying, oh, white people are scared that people of color are going to take over the country. Now, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter what skin color you are. There's a lot of black people in this country. There's a lot of Muslim people who are born in this country and identify as British, and rightfully so. That's what it says on their passport and their birth certificate.
Of course.
It's affecting them because when you have so many people in this country, the price of things increases massively. We're spending the equivalent of $3.65 billion per year housing these illegal immigrants until we find out whether they have a legitimate case to stay. And most of the time they don't. the propaganda on the left has been, I've seen a lot of people posting this tweet saying the only difference between you and a refugee is luck. And whilst that might be true in some sense, most of these people aren't refugees. They're not coming from war-torn countries. They're coming from countries in Africa which are at peace, and they're coming from countries like Romania and Albania. Why? Why are they coming here? Well, they're coming here because we give away free healthcare, and we give away free housing, and we give them a debit card with thousands of pounds on it, so they can go and spend money on. It's supposed to be for food, but God knows what else they're spending it on, and it's costing the British taxpayer a fortune. Now, I used to go out with a girl who works for the NHS. That's called the National Health Service. I won't mention her by name, but I dated two girls who works for the NHS, so you won't know which one it is. One of them works in Bristol, and who both live in Bristol. She said that she was served in 2020. She was dealing with a bunch of people who came over illegally on a boat, and she's very left wing, so she didn't say anything about it, didn't say anything racist about it. But she said she was spat at, she was assaulted, and people had to escort her outside of the building because they were worried for her safety. She said she was genuinely terrified to wear the NHS uniform because she thought she might be attacked by some of these people, majority of which didn't speak English, and she never went into much detail about why they were doing that. But it seems quite evident to me that they're very entitled. And I don't know, maybe they're attacking her because of her skin color, because she was white. Maybe they're attacking her because they just feel as though, oh, I want my benefits now because I was promised these benefits if I survive coming over in that rubber dinghy. But it's not a good thing at all. And also, I want to get into the topic. So the reason people are scared of illegal immigration in the first place is because of all the things I mentioned, and they're terrified of it turning into Paris. Because Paris in France, essentially, I've got some notes down here which I've made. Okay, so yeah, it's a lot of people have concerns that London will or already is turning into Paris, which has now been taken over by illegal immigrants, many of whom commit violent crimes. We saw in the 2022 Champions League soccer final in Paris that gangs attacked British fans attending the game, robbed them, and sexually assaulted many of the female tourists. I was like, they're worried today it's going to turn into that. And there's been so many reports of French people, French women specifically, who've been terrified of walking outside in Paris after dark because they're worried they're going to get raped or killed.
No-go zones.
So we're terrified that that's what it's going to turn into. And obviously, most of the people coming over, I would like to think that they're not actually going to do that. But they might do. Because if you don't know, it's the same reason you lock your doors at night. You don't think that every person who's going to walk past your house is going to rob you. But you lock it anyway because you're worried about the safety of your family on the off chance that one of them might do. And you don't want to invite those kind of people into your house. It's not about being racist. Again, like I said, it's just as much my issue as it is an Asian family who's living in this country legally. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter what skin color or religion you are. If you're British, then this affects you. It's costing us a fortune as well, and we're worried. The thing that most people don't seem to understand is the cities in the UK are basically full. So you got London, which is massively overpopulated already, and we keep adding to it. It was designed to house about 3 million people. Okay, 9 million people reportedly live in London. It costs an absolute fortune to rent a studio apartment in London. It costs more than buying a house somewhere up north in Scotland. Okay, the price of everything, the price for a cup of coffee is extortionate. You got road taxes there already, where if you drive a car into the center of London, you get taxed for it and you get sent a bill in the post for it. And it's like people are terrified that the rest of the UK is going to end up like London, which is massively overran. There's parts of it like Peckham, which used to be a working class trading town, which has now just been overrun by people who don't speak English. And it's terrible. It's frightening.
Of course.
That the UK could end up like that. But anyway, we still haven't gotten onto the riots, have we? So yeah, that's my purpose. So I think people have a genuine concern about illegal immigration, and I don't think that makes them a racist. And the British government is refusing to address that. Anyway, so the riots themselves, let's get into this. So, yes, so I forgot. Yeah, it all started off because the guy stabbed those three girls. You know, as is the case with a lot of organized protests, you know, see the Black Lives Matter riots of 2020, for example, that they involved into violent riots, supposedly organized by Tommy Robinson of the English Defence League, the EDL. I'm very much against violence. I don't condone these riots. They are wrong, especially some of the rioters attacking random people,
of course,
which, you know, some of them have done. And that's not good at all. You know, I'll take my Nobel Peace Prize in the mail. Thank you very much.
Now let me ask you something about those.
Go ahead.
You see the media portraying these riots as exclusively caused by the far right. How much of that is true versus maybe they've been co-opted by maybe far right groups or people opposing to be far right? Because we've had that in the U.S. where Antifa is claiming we are the America Patriot Foundation Front, and then it turns out they're all CIA.
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. I'm not an expert on this topic, and I'm not pretending to be. I'm just giving you my insight as somebody who lives here. I would love to do some research on that and get back to you, but I just don't know.
Okay.
It seems at the moment, my understanding of it is that they started off as protests and they've suddenly become very violent. And the stuff which the media is reporting on specifically those attacks are mostly true. I can tell you, I've got a source, and I won't say this person's name. He wishes to remain nameless for obvious reasons. I was told by somebody at one of these riots they attended. They said that there were only actually around 30 people there, and most people were simply there waving Union Jacks and chanting that they wanted stronger borders and for the government to stop using our taxes to house and feed illegal immigrants. The majority of whom come in are military-aged men from countries which aren't at war, which I talked about earlier. There were media crews there with cameras ready to film it, anticipating violent riots so they could get a news story there. But they didn't get the footage they wanted, so they didn't bother to use any of it. And, you know, if you're listening to this and you don't believe my source on that one, or if you think they're lying, then fine, but that's what I was told. So I think it's fair that I can report that. So I think if you're going to believe what this person has said, then maybe like a lot of it's fabricated. Like they're trying to say, call it far right. So,
and we are about to run out of time for this portion of it, so I'm gonna have to end this and then remake a new meeting. When we come back, I would like to talk about, I don't remember what year this was, however many years ago it was, a case where a young British boy poured a bottle of water, maybe you heard of this, over a Syrian refugee's head. And I guess they claimed that was waterborne. The kid had to basically run for his life. They threatened to rape his entire family. Piers Morgan kind of fanned the flames a lot of that a little bit. Not sure if you know what I'm talking about.
I remember it, but I don't have my facts with me on it.
Okay.
It's been a long time.
I just wanted to know what maybe the comparison between that is, where there are riots or in that case. But yes, we'll be back in, from our perspective, about 10 minutes because Zoom is kind of dumb like that. Yours, instantly. All right. Be right back.
Need to tell you what the actual riots are as well.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for that short little break. Zoom is not good. I'm hoping to switch to Riverside here pretty soon, and I think there's a slight lag in that phone. I'm using Droid Cam to film this. I will just stay really, really still, so that does not matter. All right, Stefan, you were saying we were talking about the riots in the UK. Floor is yours.
So I haven't actually got onto what the riots are and why I have a problem with how the media is portraying them. So my problem is how the mainstream media has covered these riots over the past week. So I'll give you an example. So I was watching, there's a big TV station called ITV News. ITV One is the channel. So I was watching the news on ITV yesterday because I happened to be watching a show on ITV and the news was on afterwards, and I was subjected to the legacy media, unfortunately. So the top story, number one, was how a group of protesters in Bristol were peacefully protesting against the English Defence League riots and holding up cliche homemade signs like saying things like racism is bad, and they'd have like refugees welcome and all that bullshit. So ITV made sure to emphasize that these were peaceful protests and absolutely no violence was being committed. Whether that whether the protests in Bristol were completely peaceful, I don't know. I haven't seen anything to suggest that they weren't. But my problem was the second story was how a group of violent far-right rioters were vandalizing stores, looting, setting cars on fire, and hunting down Muslims to violently attack them. This was supposedly happening all over the country yesterday. I told you about my source who went to one of these, and it was nothing. There was nothing to write home about. What I do know for a fact is the media has lied and deceived the public into believing that one side is peaceful and one side isn't. And the
Well, it is
truth is
Wednesday.
that, the truth is that the counter riots conducted by the pro-immigration crowd have been equally as violent and destructive. So I'll give you a few examples. So on Monday this week, Sky News sent a journalist to Birmingham to cover the anticipated far-right riots, and the far right never showed up. Instead, they were met by a large group of violent pro-immigration rioters who were wearing balaclavas, started angrily shouting at the camera and journalists, and then proceeded to slash the tires of the media team's car so they couldn't get out of there. The participants in these riots also carjacked multiple white civilians and proceeded to savagely beat them. The cars which did manage to escape the scene had the windows smashed in and had bricks thrown at them to try and injure them. This was all on live TV, keep in mind. The rioters also broke into a pub, which was hosting a family karaoke night, and it terrorized all the people inside.
Good Lord.
They attacked one of the people in the pub so badly that he ended up with a lacerated liver.
What the hell is that?
I don't know, but that's what's reported. So basically, his liver's been damaged because of it. It was also reported that several rioters were carrying machetes and using them to threaten innocent bystanders. We know all of this happened because the mainstream media accidentally broadcasted it on live TV. Of course, other news stations reported it as a mostly peaceful protest, just like they did with the riots in Minneapolis, which the current vice
fiery
president,
but mostly peaceful in front of a burning Walgreens.
Yeah, well, it's the current vice presidential nominee for the Democrats, championed in 2020.
Bailed out the rioters and the jackass current vice president nomination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a team they are. She's doubled down on the far left pick there, but that's
and they couldn't even choose Josh Shapiro because he's Jewish. They don't want to talk about that. The large portion of the Democratic Party that is highly anti-Semitic.
Yeah, they know that a lot of the Democrats who are going to vote for them are anti-Semitic and massive pro-Palestinian.
Well, they'd lose Michigan, Dearborn.
Yeah, I'm just like, that's a topic I'm very happy to get into, but we should probably finish this.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, it's all kind of tied together. Because I'm worried if she gets in, it's only a matter of time before this happens over here, because Kamala was made the border czar, whatever the hell that means, and we have however many thousand coming over every single day. Fentanyl is unrestricted. They've had 300 close encounters with actual terrorists coming across the border. God only knows how many we've missed. My worry is that they're preparing for some sort of Trojan horse October 7th style attack.
Yeah, there could be, and obviously Alex Jones is talking about he projects that to happen, and he predicted
right about everything.
So there you go. Anyway, we'll get onto that in a minute. So at these riots in Birmingham, there weren't any police around to stop them from doing anything. In case you were wondering why, it's because the chief of police of Birmingham admitted that he made the decision to allow the rioters to, quote, police themselves. He said in an interview with Sky News on Tuesday, the day after the riots, that he made the decision because people who were there protesting did so in a law-abidingly fashion with the right intentions. It's also worth noting that the independent member of parliament who represents that constituency of Birmingham, Ayub Khan, he was elected to represent the constituency, was pushed to admit that there were acts of violence by the pro-immigration rioters, but that he believed it was the natural reaction to the far right. So they're basically getting a free pass for it. They're saying, yeah, this happened, but, they've got a natural reaction to it, so it's not their fault, when in actuality it is. And that's why there's a two-tier system of policing in the UK.
So explain exactly what that is. We've heard that term a lot. What is the two-tier system of policing?
It's basically one rule for the and one rule for the other, basically. So one side, they're getting condemned, and I'll get onto this in a minute. Basically, one side is getting called far-right thugs, and the other side are getting called mostly peaceful protesters. It's basically the contrast between how the media portrayed January 6th protesters and how they portrayed the Black Lives Matter riots.
Of course.
One side caused billions of dollars worth of damage, killed 34 people, and are still recovering from it. The other side broke a few windows and had a guided tour of the Capitol. But which one was the threat to democracy?
Literally the guy who wore the Rams hat.
Yeah. Jacob Chansley.
Vikings hat with the horns.
Jacob Chansley was his name, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I love how
that's the best comparison. So that's a two-tier system of justice. So all these January 6th, if you were within a mile of the Capitol building and the FBI knocks on your door and arrests you, indicts you,
Yeah,
It's
old women standing on the Capitol lawn.
Both, it's like, can you not just admit both are wrong? Why is one side allowed to get away with it and the other side isn't? Is what I
We
want
see,
to
and if you look historically,
that's
when societal trust start to degrade, and you start to have instability. When one side cannot trust the current system of justice, that's when things start to get a little fiery.
Exactly. Yeah. So in case
We've
you're
seen that
listening
here in the U.S. People are worried that if you are a Trump supporter, if you are a conservative, the entire legal apparatus, all of society is essentially against you.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether you're guilty or not.
It's ridiculous, and it's getting very scary. So, in case you're listening to this and you think, oh, but that's only one example, Stefan, fair enough. But what about all these right-wing riots that are happening? Maybe just one example isn't good enough. Well, I'll give you a few more. Okay, so this past week, so there's Bolton, Stoke, and Middlesbrough. They're all cities or small cities, towns in the northwest of the UK, of England. So in Bolton, Middlesbrough, and Stoke, mobs of people who appeared to be Muslims marched and chanted in the streets, Allah Akbar. And thanks to social media, we've seen that some of the mob decided to attack lone individuals for seemingly no reason, other than, I assume, because they were white. At least no reason it was caught on camera anyway. Maybe they antagonized them, but I seriously doubt that somebody would be stupid enough to antagonize a massive group of violent protesters. You'd think, if there were one individual on their own. In Middlesbrough in particular, several people were attacked by gangs of pro-immigration rioters. Sky News reported on this live, initially to condemn the right-wing rioters for vandalising a taxi, which did happen, to be fair, but they failed to address the fact that on live TV, there were several anti-white protesters walking past the camera carrying machetes and baseball bats. What's interesting is that some legacy media journalists did initially report on this. For example, Anthony Thompson of Channel 4. Channel 4 is a state-run TV channel in the UK. He reported on everything I just mentioned on Twitter. He posted video evidence to his Twitter account as well. All tweets have since been deleted. Why? So there are a bunch of examples there of they're just vandal, and they're getting away with it. The politicians are saying that, oh, they've got every right to do that, but the other side doesn't. When in actuality, it should be both sides equally as bad, and both sides are going to feel the full wrath of the UK law.
Of course.
Yeah. So the government and police responses. So the riots which I've mentioned and the acts of violence and terror from the anti-white pro-immigration supporters, whether they be in response to the right-wing riots or for any other reason, are just a few examples of riots which have been taking place across the UK. And it's opened people's eyes to the fact that there is a two-tier policing system happening in the UK. The legacy media has been quick to condemn the far-right rioters, and whilst I can't disagree with them on what they've also insisted on what they've said, they've also insisted that two-tier policing is far-right propaganda and that there has been no violent demonstrations from anybody other than the far right, which is just completely false because I've just given you multiple examples there, and they're just four of them. Our Prime Minister, who's been newly elected, Keir Starmer, has gone on record vowing to protect Muslim communities at all costs, and he's refused to condemn any of their actions. He's also called the anti-immigration protesters violent thugs, as well as suggesting that they're racist and evil and will be put in prison. Thankfully, prisons have a lot of vacancies now because the new Labour government is releasing violent criminals, murderers, and rapists. The majority of them appear to be non-white citizens. That is a fact. He said when he was elected, "Oh, we need to release these people from prison," when they're rapists, they're murderers, amongst other things as well. And they're the kind of people we should pay to have locked up. But no, we're going to replace them. And Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, they've said these rioters, if they're arrested, will be sentenced to 32 months in prison.
My God. How much for the guy who actually murdered those little girls?
And this goes for if you're retweeting something as well. They're trying to say we'll give you 32 months in prison for inciting violence. I was like, how do you know that we're inciting violence? Not we, because I haven't said anything, obviously. How do you know that certain people are inciting violence? And how do you know that on the other side you don't have people saying, "Oh, we should go out and we should fight against these racist bastards"? Which has happened. It actually happened a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah,
there was a massive riot in Leeds. They were setting buses on fire. They were basically doing things that are reminiscent of what happened in Minneapolis in 2020, and the media just didn't really cover it because it didn't fit their agenda. But that happened, and Keir Starmer said nothing about them because they were all the wrong skin color. So essentially, that's what's been happening in the UK. There, I've got a few other things to say as well. So yeah, it's I think our prime minister at the moment is like he's done a very, very poor job of addressing this, wouldn't you say? From what you know.
From what I've seen, of course, yeah.
Yeah, from what I've seen it. So Keir Starmer, my opinion of him, I think he's a spineless, clueless, globalist, left-wing scumbag, and he's made it very clear that he hates us all, and he's quite willing to see his country destroyed in order to signal virtue. Like Starmer and his friends in the media are responsible for effectively pouring a gallon of kerosene onto the fire. And what's happened. So what happens when you condemn one side? It just makes everything even worse. And I'm under the impression that that's exactly what they want, to be honest with you.
Of course. And
it's led to Elon Musk on Twitter calling Keir Starmer two-tier Keir. So, and now you have people in the UK in the legacy media are claiming that we need to ban Twitter. Basically, it needs to be taken off from all platforms. Again, that's very dangerous. That's the one app in the entire world, apart from maybe Rumble, but that's more of like a YouTube video style.
Yeah.
It's the one app in the world where you can post whatever you want and it won't get censored. If you post something that's inaccurate, it will get community notice so people know that you're lying. Okay, seems like the fairest free speech app in the world to me. And the UK and people in the UK legacy media want to ban it, because people are actually seeing, oh, you're lying. You're not telling the full story. They're a threat to them. Whatever you think of the legacy media, you do not hate them enough.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Do you think these people have any sort of, how to put, self-awareness? Like they maybe were going too far, threatening to ban entire social media companies, throwing people in prison? Or as an American, do I just have that sort of free speech mindset so ingrained to me, but over there it's just like, yes, obviously you're inciting violence, you should go to prison?
Well, some of them do genuinely think that. I think maybe I'm not the best person to ask, because I lived in America for 4 years and I've loved America my entire life, and I've studied American history and I love it and I respect it. The average British person who maybe doesn't know that much about America, they might just look at it and think, oh, it's stupid that they allowed them to have freedom of speech so they can say they can incite hate crimes. I think after a while, if you lie to yourself enough, you eventually start to believe your own bullshit.
Yep.
So I think
even if fool yourself into believing anything.
I think sometimes they might take some self-awareness and you might think, huh, maybe I'm, you know, that meme, the Simpsons meme, where it's Principal Skinner saying, huh, maybe I'm going too far. No, actually, it's the other people's fault. It's basically that. They're saying, oh, maybe I'm going a bit too far by saying we should ban X. No, absolutely not. It's the right wing's fault for inciting violence, and it's Elon Musk's fault for calling our beloved prime minister, who's been in charge for about 32 days and has made an absolute balls up of the entire situation already.
Maybe. Now, speaking of, if there are any other British listeners out there, I encourage you, read the founding fathers: John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. Read their letters, read their biographies. If you really want to know why they thought free speech was so important, they put it at the top of the list. Read what they thought. The government, you guys, that they had just gotten away from. It's very valuable.
Exactly. It's definitely an interesting subject that's worth studying. We never covered it in school in the UK. All my knowledge of history before I went to college from the US came from me reading books and going to museums. Thankfully, I'm from a family that's wealthy enough to take multiple trips to the US. So we actually went to Washington and we went to Boston on multiple vacations, and I got to learn about this stuff, seeing it firsthand. Not everybody's as lucky as me.
Of course.
Definitely.
What is it? Washington wasn't Washington. Read what Ben Franklin said about why we put free speech in the Constitution. This stuff is incredibly important. We had just fought a tyrannical government. We knew basically what problems we had under that and how I don't know, I sounded stupid there, but let me ask you a question. There has been some chatter. Elon Musk has talked about this on Twitter. What is the possible endpoint of this? Do you think it's just going to fizzle out, or is it just going to increasingly escalate into something far, far worse?
So this isn't the first time we've had riots in response to something that's happened. So in 2011, that's the only one I've been alive for. There were riots. I can't remember exactly what they were in response to, but I think it was like a police brutality incident. So there were a lot of rioters, and basically it started off as protest, like most of them do, and then people took advantage of it and saw it as an excuse to, commit violence and get away with it because there's so many people doing it anyway. People use it as an excuse to break into stores, high street stores in London and steal like Louis Vuitton belts and iPhones and the latest pair of Jordans and things amongst that. So it went on for a few weeks. People were genuinely. This was in the middle of the summer as well, by the way. So we were off school. I've had nothing better to do than go outside and play sports, which is what I fully intended on doing. All of a sudden, all of our parents said, I think it's too dangerous for you all to go outside. So we had to stay inside. So you can imagine, with it being red hot outside, perfect day for throwing a football around. Weren't able to go outside. We were very upset by that. But nonetheless, these violent riots were happening. Our Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, who, by the way, I'm not a fan of in the slightest. I don't like him, but he was a Conservative Prime Minister. I think he handled that situation very well. He said that we will use the security footage, every single security camera we find. We will use every piece of information that's posted to social media, whether that be videos. Keep in mind it was 2011, so the quality of the videos was nowhere near as good as it is now. We will find every single one of you, and we'll put you all in prison. And he did, and he made sure that people who were running the news put all these videos on the news, and said, if you know this person, report them. And they did, and loads of them went to prison for it. And you know what? After 2 weeks, they were like, "Oh, maybe we shouldn't be doing this actually because we're going to go to prison," and they stopped.
Yeah,
and that was it. Keir Starmer has taken the opposite approach. He's basically said, one side, you can do whatever you want and you won't get in trouble for it. We encourage you to keep doing it, actually, because that's going to make me look like a good person. It's going to give me the opportunity to virtue signal.
And sacrificing the entire culture of the country and the altar of wokeness.
It's like pouring a gallon of gasoline onto the fire, because it's just going to make the other side worse. They're going to think, look, they're out to get us. They're trying to take our country away from us. And they're going to riot even harder is what's going to go on. And then obviously the other side's going to get even worse because they think, oh, we've been given a free pass to do whatever they want. There's violent thugs on the other side as well. On the contrast to what the media is saying, it's going to make it so much worse. And honestly, it's getting quite scary. Like, I was at work last night. I usually work in the evenings. And we got told to leave at 6 o'clock. I was supposed to work for another few hours, but I got told to leave at 6 o'clock because apparently there was a riot that was going to happen at 7. And he said, look, we're closing early. I work in a gym. We're closing early. We're not going to have any classes on. Just go home. And I was like, well, okay, fine. So I went home and I was a bit disappointed about it because I actually liked my job.
Yeah.
And I like seeing it. But yeah, it was, I think it's getting ridiculous and I can't see an end point for it. The way he's handled this, unless his advisors say to him, look, you need to condemn the other side as well. You need to condemn all of them and say every single one of you will be put in prison, regardless of which side you're on. At the moment, they're trying to use we're going to take a leaf out of George Orwell's playbook from 1984, and we're going to put everybody in prison who says anything that we disagree with. We're going to take away your freedom of speech. If you dare retweet something that we deem as hate speech or inciting violence, we will put you in prison for 32 months. God. I can't see it getting any better, to be honest with you. But what I will say is that most of these riots tend to happen in summer when the weather's nice outside.
Of course.
I think the weather, when it gets rainy and cold, when the fall comes around, people are going to be put off it. But, there's like, how many weeks is there until the weather gets bad? What, 7 or 8?
More or less.
Yeah,
well, you guys are a little more north than I am, but
yeah, it's usually around mid-September, early October. It starts getting a bit colder outside.
Yeah.
So I think maybe worst case scenario, it keeps going on until then, but I can't see it getting better anytime soon.
But that still doesn't solve the problem. You're just pushing it off till the next incident happens.
We have extremely poor leadership at the moment. And I've been aware that it's going to happen for at least a year. I've just come to peace with it. I've said, look, the way that British politics works is you've got two parties in place realistically that can get in. You've got the Conservatives, called the Tories, which we call them, and Labour. Labour's basically the UK's version of the Democrats, the left-wing party. Yep. And it's like the Conservatives have been in power for 14 years. They've done a terrible job of it. The people are not happy with them. So the natural response is, people are going to swing, the independent voters are going to say, well, I'm sick of them. I'm going to vote for the other side just for a change. And I was like, I've just come to peace with it, to be honest with you. Yep. I was like, it's going to happen. Hopefully it won't be as bad as I anticipate, but we're 1 month in and there's already riots in the streets.
Yep. It seems as if all across Europe, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No, that's it.
It seems as if one glimmer of hope I've noticed as an outside observer is that all across Europe, France, Italy, Poland has been that way forever. There seems to be these kind of rise of like populists who come up out
Yeah.
of nowhere and the media deems them far right Nazis, but that's not the case at all. It's just people who say, try to get you back to sanity.
Well, Giorgia Meloni's the most obvious one. She's the Prime Minister of Italy, and she
Italy,
got
yep, yep.
deemed. I was watching a talk show. It had
France,
nothing to
something
do.
screwy happened there too. They
Yeah.
redid the
Oh, yeah.
election or
France
something
did
like. I
it.
don't know how
Yeah.
that works,
Well,
but
they actually didn't do anything against the rules, but it was highly unethical. What happened in France was they had 2 rounds of voting. Okay, I don't know why they do that. We don't do that. I think
it's
France is the
stupid.
only country to do it. So they have voting on the 4th of July, I think it was, and the 11th of
Yep.
July. It's like a week apart. The first round, Marine Le Pen, who's the leader of the far right party in France, won the majority of the votes, and she looks like she was going to do really well. So Emmanuel Macron, who's the Prime Minister of France, saw this, and he figured out that the vote was being split on the left side between his party, which is more centrist but globalist, slightly left, and the far left party. So he cut a deal with the far left party saying, going off the polls, if my party's candidate is more likely to win this constituency, then your candidate will drop out, and vice versa.
Oh
So
God.
essentially, what the people did, if they wanted to vote for the far left candidate, but the far left candidate dropped out, they voted for Macron's party. If they wanted to vote for Macron's party, and Macron's party candidate dropped out, they voted for the far left because they came together and they decided that we might have our differences, but the important thing is we stop the fascist far right and Marine Le Pen getting in.
Fascist.
The fascist, yeah. So they did, and they were able to win the seats based on that. So you could say, oh, it was unethical, they cheated, but it's within the rules
Nothing
for them to do
illegal.
that. So there's nothing we can say about it. And I was very disappointed on it because it directly affects the UK.
Of course.
If Marine Le Pen got in, then illegal immigration it wouldn't completely stop, but it would definitely hinder it. There'd be no so the way that illegal immigrants are getting into the UK, for those of you who don't know, they're going to France because it's easy to get into France because Macron lets all of them in, but they're not getting the benefits that they get in the UK, like free healthcare. So what they do, they go to the English Channel, and you can swim. If you're a good enough swimmer, you can swim from France to the UK.
Yeah.
If you're a good enough swimmer, it's not that far away, honestly. So people they build like a raft or to get like a rubber dinghy, which you can get from a supermarket, if a boat you can go fishing on, and they sail across the English Channel from France to England. They get to Dover or wherever it is. They get on the beach and then they immediately run into the country, and there's no security looking into it. That's how they're getting in.
You guys have like a Coast Guard
Right.
equivalent
So,
type thing?
I mean, we do, but the shit. They don't do the job. It's like
Yeah.
Nigel Farage when he was running for prime minister. He actually went out and just for journalistic purposes was recording how many of them came in. There were loads of them, and what I will say, every single one of them, from what he saw, were military-age men. I don't know which country they
Yep.
were from because I didn't speak to them, but they
I
weren't
think it
women in
matters.
clothing like the Liberals would have you believe. They weren't, and it didn't look like they were fleeing war-torn countries. So basically, how this relates to the French election, if Le Pen won, then they wouldn't be able to get into France in the first place. So it wouldn't matter if we had a left-wing government because they wouldn't be able to get to France in the first place to get the boat across. Problem solved. But Macron got in and France got even worse because they had to form a coalition with the Communist Party. So that's even worse. The one thing that might come of it, maybe if they could become so left-wing, they'll give them so many benefits that they won't want to come to England.
Yeah.
And they'll stay in France, I guess. I mean, they don't have a particular preference. It's just that England's giving away a bunch of free benefits to them, which France isn't. So they can get
Well, and
into
that's why
France.
France is probably never going to say no. They don't, because I think in the back of his
Well,
mind,
you
maybe
got
not even there,
well,
he doesn't
Macron.
want them there, so he knows they'll go up there to England.
I think that's a part of it, but France itself has just been ruined. Like Paris, I mentioned the 2022
Yep.
Champions League final. So it was Liverpool was playing, I believe it was Real Madrid in the final. So an English team, Liverpool. So a lot of British fans went over to watch it, and they were attacked viciously by illegal immigrants who were in Paris. There were a bunch of migrant gangs that went around trying to steal people's wallets, steal women's purses, pick fights with Liverpool fans, and sexually assault the women who were there. That happened, and the media didn't report on it. In actuality, what happened, because like some of them fought back, the media said, "Oh, the Liverpool fans were causing trouble there," and I was like, "Well, that's not true, is it?" I don't like Liverpool. They are known for being dickheads, but like they weren't in the wrong that time. Disruption, but yeah, it's like if Le Pen won, then they wouldn't be able to get into England in the first place. Now they've got a coalition with a communist government, so they're Communist Party, and I don't think that's what they're actually called. I'm just saying that for
well, basically.
So they want to give illegal immigrants all these benefits, which are actually more luxurious than what we're giving them. So hopefully it will stop, because they'll just think, what's the point in risking going all the way to England when I can just stay in France and get all the same things, if not better?
Of course.
And that's a selfish thing to say, because I don't really want France to fall, but at this point, I don't really care.
Better them than you, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Which isn't the best situation, but if someone, no, I get it. I get you.
Yeah, so that's basically it. Yeah. Scary times.
Yes. And one thing that does kind of worry me, you mentioned like how they kind of consolidated the votes in that second election over in France. Over here, I hate using the term NPC because it's been ruined by dickheads, but it just seems as if people have very, very short memories, and especially with Kamala Harris, don't remember that they all hated her only a few weeks ago. The media, to their credit, all across the world, the left-wing media is incredibly effective at manipulating people.
Yeah, well, it's quite easy to manipulate people when that's all you watch. Yeah. It's like when I was talking about the riots, then ITV, they were very particular in how they reported it. First of all, pro-immigration protests, all peaceful, all singing Kumbaya around a fire, basically, is how they reported it. Oh, how can you hate these people? And then they go, and now the far right thugs who are causing violence, throwing bricks through taxis, even though both sides done that, setting fire to cars, attacking people randomly on the street because of the skin color. I was told by one of my friends that she works in McDonald's, that she works with multiple black girls, and they were scared to walk to the bus stop on their own. So it's obviously been effective. I don't see any reports of black people being attacked. White people are being attacked. British people are being attacked. I don't see any report of them targeting black people. But yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, so it started with the kid from Wales who stabbed 3 children, which was horrific. And started off protests to that, thinking he was an illegal immigrant. Turned out he wasn't an illegal immigrant, and the left's done a very good job of using that as a fact and saying, oh, they're just far right folks who have... and a lot of the fact is, a lot of them are. A lot of them are. They're just using it as an example, as an excuse to commit violence, and it's wrong. But the point is, that's wrong. The other side is also wrong. They shouldn't get a pass.
Of course, and that's a good point. To wrap this all up, I guess, say listeners in the U.S., UK, and the weird few we have in India, have these conversations with your friends, with your family who are not watching the show or others like it, who will actually give you these facts. If they're just sitting around watching CNN, BBC, Sky News, have these conversations with them. They say, wait, I thought Trump did say Nazis are fine people. Say, no, he did not. That was an edited clip. Find the original clip. Have these conversations. Change the narrative.
It's interesting to say that, because when I was at work yesterday, I mentioned my boss, who I have a lot of respect for, but he has slightly different political opinions to me. We started talking about politics, obviously, because we were closing because of the riots, and it was mostly a civilized conversation. It got heated when he said, because we got onto US politics, and I said, yeah, huge Trump supporter, love Donald Trump, and he actually said, which was surprising, he said if he lived in America, he would vote for Donald Trump this time.
Holy crap.
Which I thought, okay, fair enough. And then, but he asked me, oh, what did you think of what went on at the Capitol? And I said, well, we've been lied to about it. Like, it is massively fabricated. And I was surprised he took a lot of offense to that. He actually raised his voice at me, not shouting at me. But I said, well, no. I was like, he literally said in his speech, go and peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. And he shouted at me and said, come on, don't be an idiot. You're smarter than that. I was like, no, he actually said it. I got to the point, I was like, I'd appreciate it if you didn't raise your voice at me, because that's just a fact. But yeah, he did say that, and he also said he incited it. He incited an insurrection, and I said, well, actually, there was one person who got shot, and it was Ashley Babbitt, and he was a protester.
Yep.
Few
The
people
most
did.
armed portion of the country didn't bring a single gun to their insurrection.
Didn't bring a single gun to this insurrection. He literally said, "Go and peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country left." He believed that election was stolen. Whether you believe that or not is a completely different discussion entirely. He had every right to go and organize a protest against it. It's his right, his First Amendment right to do so. He didn't say that he wanted them to break into the Capitol building and kill people in there. It's not his responsibility to make sure that all of them don't do that. However, he told Nancy Pelosi, "I want to send the National Guard there to protect the Capitol building, to make sure it doesn't get out of hand." And he also, and my boss said that, like, he didn't believe me on that. I was like, "Well, it's true. Look it up." And then he said, "Well, I didn't know that." I was like, "Yeah, he did." So how do you explain? How do you explain that it was an insurrection? He tried to overthrow the government when he said to Nancy Pelosi, "I want the National Guard there to make sure that things don't get out of hand." Nancy Pelosi ignored it. And the videotapes, which Kevin McCarthy released when he was Speaker of the House, show that Nancy Pelosi was walking around the Capitol building, not a care in the world, making sure that the media camera in front of her could track her every move. So there was one example, you saw the security footage. She walked past some columns in the Capitol building. She paused. This is when she was supposedly fearing for her life that people were going to come in and kill her. She paused, made sure the camera could go around so that she could still be seen walking out of the Capitol building. It was a massive fraud, all of it. And it's like that's the argument that we had. So like he tried to say, no, Trump knew what he was doing. He had an army of people who were basically a cult following. He knew that they were going to. It's like, well, you can't say that. I study in journalism. You can't say that he knew this when he's never said it. That is called defamation. You can't say that.
Of course. January 6th was the best day for the Democratic Party since the South seceded.
Liberal Christmas.
Oh, my God. All right. I do believe that's all we got. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say for fans across the pond?
No, I was like, I appreciate you having me on, Evan. I'm just like, I hope I've come across as very diplomatic on this. If the British police are listening to it,
any British police?
I would also just like to reiterate one more time. I was like, on the topic of immigration, it's not whites versus blacks or Muslims. It is British people against illegal immigrants, okay? It's British people against the media and British people against the government, okay? British people, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, Asian, or, you're from another country, but you've come here legally. As far as I'm concerned, you're British. I've got a lot of Muslim friends who I think have bought into the narrative that it's a race issue. It might be for some people who are rioting, but as far as the topic of illegal immigration is concerned, it's British people, regardless of skin color, ethnicity, or religion, against the people who want them to come in and take over.
Of course. All right. I do believe that does it. Stefan, we will if you want your socials plugged, let me know. Maybe you don't with all this stuff, but all right.
I'll probably get okay, yeah, go on. The 50-Yard Line YouTube channel, if you want to subscribe there. I've got a lot of content that's similar to this. Probably not going to talk about this topic on there, but I am going to cover a lot of US politics.
I wonder why. All right. Remember, Big Brother is watching you. I will be right back. We got some Reddit reads and they are very enraging. We will see you later. Stefan, have a good one.
Appreciate it, Evan. Thank you.
And we are back over on the normal show. That interview will be released separately so you can watch it along without having to see just my ugly face. Yeah, he's British and they're not, the prettiest people, but I'm sure they don't have really the male pattern baldness problem. Although Boris Johnson, he had the weird wavy hair thing going on, so who knows. Yeah, that was terrifying. People of Britain understand this is why we don't have free healthcare. This is why that didn't make any sense. This is why we have the Second Amendment. So shit like this doesn't happen. So if they break you in your house and want to kill and rape your entire family, they have 17 new breathing holes. Yeah, maybe think about that next time you want to make fun of us for some stupid shit. Save your life from the Nazis. Anyway, socials, once again, you can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and X at UnorthoBros. Go ahead and give us a follow over there for show announcements, sketches, little jokes. It's a good time. Email us at the Unorthodox podcast at proton.me. I will probably be reading some viewer emails with my guest next week, so give us some fun questions. Shoot them over there right now. Stop what you're doing. I don't care if your mother is dying. Send them right now. Thank you. And donate to the show, $5, $10, $100, $1,000, your whole life savings. Break open that little piggy bank and send it over to Evan-Brennan-10 on Venmo. All of that information is available down in the description. Be sure to like, share, hit notifications, and subscribe. And ladies and gentlemen, I will see you next week. Keep it unorthodox. Goodbye.